The Premier League season is back and we are already going into game week 3 this weekend of the 23-24 season. Let's have a little look back at the first 2 game weeks and have a little look at which teams could be involved in a potential relegation battle come the end of this season. Which teams are in that bottom half and which teams am I concerned for? Which teams do I think will be okay? Let's have a little discussion today. Before we do get into it, please do make sure of course to drop a like on this video. We'll go for 300 likes. Do share your thoughts as well as hitting that like button. Do share your thoughts if you're a Premier League fan or if you're not. Just let me know what you've made of the opening game weeks. Which teams are you concerned for and which teams do you think will be okay? Do make sure of course as well to hit that subscribe button, and let's jump into the Premier League table. So then, as you can see to the side of me, I've got the Premier League table from 10th down to 20th place. Do bear in mind with Burnley and Luton, who we will come on to, they've only played one game because their game last week was postponed due to the fact that Luton Town Stadium has obviously not been ready yet to host a Premier League game. Let's go through the teams one by one, starting off with Everton, who are rock bottom and deserve to be. A lot of people expected Everton to struggle this season, and we're only 2 games in, but from what we've seen so far, they really are struggling. I personally predicted Everton to just stay up in 17th place just before the season started, and what I put that down to is the fact that they always just seem to do it by the skin of their teeth and the fact that they've got Sean Dyche. But with teams that are involved in relegation battles season upon season, one year the penny will drop and they will fall through that trapdoor and be relegated, and the early signs aren't looking good here for Everton. After 2 games, no goals scored, 5 goals conceded, bottom of the table, pointless, and the only team to have played 2 games and not scored yet. This is the concern for Everton for me. They've played 2 sides that were just inside the top half last season in Fulham and Villa. Now, they're not the easiest games, but they've also not played a top 4 side there. At home to Fulham, you would have thought Everton might be able to get something. Personally, I think that's where Everton will get most of their points because the Goodison faithful can roar them over the line, but they lost that 1-0, and I really am concerned after that 4-0 defeat to Aston Villa. Now, yes, people will be saying it's only 2 weeks and there is still that possibility Everton could have something dramatic change at some point in the season and they could still shoot up the table and finish high, but the early signs are concerning here for Everton. Calvert-Lewin injured as well, and as I said, goals are the problem. Can you see Everton scoring soon or even scoring 2 goals in one game? That seems quite a hard feat for Everton at the moment. The next 2 games are massive against Wolves and Sheffield United, 2 other sides that have picked up nothing from their opening 2 games. Everton need to get something from those. Otherwise, I personally could see Sean Dyche being the first casualty this season. I'm not going to completely put it all down to Sean Dyche. He has got to take some of the blame, but collectively, Everton as a club, it's a mess. Not much better off are Wolves, who are in 19th place, just ahead of Everton. They've also played 2, lost 2, conceded 5, but they have actually scored 1 goal, that being a consolation against Brighton. It definitely didn't help to have so much chaos around Wolves just before the season started, with the lack of transfer activity, the manager being unhappy, and then the change in management so close to a new season. I do think that that means that Wolves have had later preparations, and it could mean that we might find that Wolves get better as the season goes on. They are readjusting. If performances are anything to take away, I will say at Manchester United, in a game I did watch, Wolves played really well. Really unlucky not to get anything from that game. If they could finish their chances, they'd have won that game. And then also there was that late drama with the penalty that wasn't given, which I'm still surprised by. But other than that, they've got to move on, and they didn't respond very well against Brighton, albeit Brighton are a good team. So what I will take away from it is not a great start here for Wolves, but they have played 2 sides better than the 2 sides Everton have played, in my opinion, because they've played Manchester United and Brighton, Wolves have. But they do need to start scoring. Just like with Everton, goal scoring is a worry here for Wolves. They didn't score many last season. I do think O'Neill's a decent manager. I did like him at Bournemouth. And just like with Everton's next 2 fixtures, Wolves' next 2 fixtures are massive. They go away to Goodison and then they've got Crystal Palace after Everton. 2 massive games there for Wolves. They need to get a move on. They need to start scoring goals. But as I say, with the chaos before the season started, it's really not giving them a good start. In 18th place are Burnley, and this is the first one I'm going to say. This is a false position at this moment in time, or at least we can't judge them from what we've seen so far. We've seen 1 game, and that's against the best team in the league, Manchester City, and I still think there were some positives for Burnley to take from that. I think Burnley are going to set up different to some of the teams that are going to be in the relegation battle. I think they're going to go for it against some of the top teams and be less cautious at the back. It might result in a few thumpings like they did get against Manchester City, but they are still gelling. A few new faces coming coming through the door, but ultimately Burnley, they've got the resources to do well. They've got a good manager. I think when they really do get a good run of games going, they will be all right. Obviously, as we said, their game against Luton Town was postponed. That's why they're on one game. Not really Burnley's fault, that one. Although there was an option for it to be played at Turf Moor. I think Burnley refused on that one. Either way, the next two games, Aston Villa and Tottenham, not easy, but I wouldn't be surprised if Burnley could actually beat one of those two. So I think Burnley will be all right. We can't really judge them on what we've seen so far. I think they're in a false position at the moment. It's still early days. Luton Town fans will also be saying that the same applies to them because we've only seen one game. People are a little bit more concerned for Luton Town than Burnley. I think more people expect Burnley to do well. They've got more Premier League household names. As for Luton Town though, like I say, you can't really judge on what you've seen so far. One game played and against a very good Brighton side away from home. One thing Luton Town do need to nip in the bud is those silly mistakes like the Mpanzu one, which led to the third goal, which killed the game. Ultimately, up until that, I thought Brighton were the better team, but Luton Town kept themselves in the game, and that's what they need to do in the Premier League. Keep themselves in the game, especially when they're on the road. Maybe pinch a goal. Carlton Morris could chip in with goals this season. I do think, though, when they get a good run of games going, and especially at home at Kenilworth Road, I think Luton Town will start picking up points. I'm not saying it's going to be easy for them to stay up. I think Luton Town do have a better chance of staying up than some people are letting on, and they have made a couple of additions recently in the likes of Ross Barkley and Tim Krul, who are obviously more familiar with the Premier League, so we will give them that. Their next two games are Chelsea away and then West Ham at home. They've also got a Gillingham at home game in the Cup as well coming up, but it's the league that matters for Luton Town. Chelsea away is going to be difficult. I don't know, if Luton Town keep themselves in that game, if they've learnt from their mistakes against Brighton, they could feel like they could maybe get something or at least be in that game, because Chelsea haven't won yet. I do think that West Ham game at home is massive though. Their first home game, they want to send out a statement that Kenilworth Road is not going to be an easy place to go. But it really is too early to judge at this moment in time for Luton Town. One game played against a very good Brighton side. We'll see how they're doing in a few games' time. Sheffield United are just above them. Sheffield United have played two and lost two. Both games they did lose just by the one goal, but they did play sides that they feel like they maybe could have got something against. Crystal Palace at home wasn't the worst opening game, but they did just lose that one 1-0. And then Nottingham Forest away, they lost 2-1. I thought they played quite well in the second half, and they have got an absolute gem in Gustavo Hamer. Now, people were worried for Sheffield United when we saw Ndiaye and Berger going out the door. I do think they could still do with one or two additions, and a striker that can step forwards and get 10 goals or something would be crucial. That's what a team needs to stay up down the bottom. But I do think Gustavo Hamer is a massive pickup. Obviously, I'm a Coventry City fan, and if it wasn't for Victor Gyökeres, he would have been the standout player at Coventry City by a mile. I personally think he was the best player last season. He was voted player of the season. I think he could be for Sheffield United, and he is a Premier League player in my opinion. What a debut for him. As I say, some decent signs from the second half against Nottingham Forest. I think Sheffield United will start picking up points here and there. I do think they'll get more points at home, like we've said, with some of the other teams in this relegation battle. Their next game is Manchester City. That is not easy, but then it's Everton. That's one where they really need to get something. Let's see if Sheffield United pick up their first point soon. In 15th are Chelsea. I'm just going to brush over them very quickly because I don't expect them to be down here for much longer. Chelsea have played two and only picked up 1 point, but the performance against Liverpool was really encouraging, especially in the second half. They could have won that game, so we were thinking, all right, they're really going to get going. They should get something against West Ham. They lost that game 3-1. Not ideal here for Pochettino, but ultimately we know that Chelsea should get some points soon and should start climbing. Like I say, it's very early. 2 games, Chelsea being 15th. The table can look like absolutely anything after just 2 games. I think Chelsea will start getting a move on soon. Interestingly enough, they've got Luton Town and Nottingham Forest both at home in their next 2 games. If they were to struggle in those two, it'd obviously keep Chelsea in the bottom half and give those other teams points. So we could see Chelsea maybe taking 1 or 2 more steps backwards if they lost those games. But obviously Chelsea will be wanting to target 6 points from those 2 home games. And obviously I don't think they're going to be in this mix. I think they're going to be fine. I think they'll climb towards the European places as the season goes on. In 14th place, Bournemouth, an interesting one. 2 games played, some encouraging signs. They haven't picked up that first win yet, but a decent 1-1 draw against West Ham United. And then to lose 3-1 at Liverpool, no disgrace, but they did take the lead, and obviously a vast improvement on when they went to Liverpool last season and lost 9-0. A lot has changed since then, obviously. I think Areola's Bournemouth side are showing some some decent signs at the moment. Traore looks alright, they've got Solanke, Neto's a good goalkeeper. The points will come, but their next two games don't look easy. They've got Brentford and Tottenham, so if they don't get anything from those two, they will go into the first international break without a win, and then maybe a little bit of pressure. AFC Bournemouth fans, do share your thoughts. It might be a case that lots of teams struggle to get that first win for a few games, and there could be a real low tide at the start of the season. As I say, it's early doors. There is still that possibility Bournemouth could have a very strong season and not be involved, but Bournemouth fans, do share your thoughts. In 13th place, Fulham, after 2 games, 1 win, 1 defeat. They did grind out that 1-0 win at Goodison on the opening day. That 3-0 defeat at home to Brentford, cause for concern there. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Brentford, they're brilliant, but I did think Fulham last season could go toe-to-toe with them. They have lost Mitrovic, and looking at their next 2 games, things could get a little bit worse before they get better for Fulham, because they've got Arsenal and Manchester City in their next 2 games. So there is that real possibility that Fulham could be going into the first international break with 3 league defeats on the bounce. Like I say though, that first win at Everton was crucial. It's kept Fulham away from trouble, at least for now anyway, and as the season goes on, the men and the boys will be separated. Are Fulham going to be a man again? Because they were so good last season. You just wonder, if they hit such a high last year, will there be a bit of a regression to struggle to meet that again? I still think if Fulham finish like 11th or 12th, that's such a good season. Obviously it's not quite a top half finish like last year, but it could be that little bit more difficult this season for Fulham. It's their second season. Teams can struggle in their second season, not always, but there's no Mitrovic, and as I said, there's some tough games in this start for Fulham. So Fulham fans, once again, do share your thoughts down below as well. Do you think you're going to be alright, or do you think there's a potential to be maybe involved in this relegation battle again? Those signs against Brentford weren't great. In 12th place are Manchester United, and just like when we spoke about Chelsea, I'm just going to brush over them briefly. I don't think they're going to be involved in the Premier League relegation battle, which was what we love to talk about on this channel. Manchester United are 3 points better off than where they were this time last year. They can start seasons badly. They picked up 0 points from their first 2 games last year. It's not been a great start for United, I must say, to be honest, because that 1-0 win over Wolves was far from convincing, and then they lost 2-0 to Spurs, who I thought would be lacking firepower without Harry Kane. But Spurs looked very good. Manchester United maybe not so much. They've got some big games coming up, do Manchester United, Nottingham Forest, and then Arsenal after that. The Arsenal game will be massive. So Manchester United will feel like they definitely need to nail 3 points against Nottingham Forest at home to really try and get that confidence back. But I don't know, things are all a bit up in the air at Manchester United. Obviously there's the Greenwood thing going on at the moment. Is that maybe distracting a little bit? I don't know. But the way Ten Hag came out after that Tottenham game, it looked like he was feeling the pressure. Not a great start for United. Ultimately, I do think they'll be finishing a lot higher than 12th place, but we shall see. Not a great start for United, but obviously it's still better than where they started last season. Manchester United will get a move on at some point. They won't be involved in this. 11th place, Crystal Palace, middle diddle. Typical Crystal Palace, really. They always occupy 11th place, even this early on into the season. To be honest, it's probably where I think they're going to finish. Their results so far doesn't surprise me. They've beaten a team in Sheffield United who have just come up and probably going to be involved in the relegation battle, and they've lost 1-0 to Arsenal, a team that's probably going to be in that top 4, possibly fighting for the title. The 1-0 win at Sheffield United was encouraging. I think the likes of Eze's played well. Edouard got a goal. He's up and running for the season. So yeah, some encouraging signs there. And to be honest, they weren't terrible in that defeat to Arsenal. I think there's still some positives to take. With Roy Hodgson, I think Crystal Palace are going to be fine. There might be times where if they do lose back-to-back games that they drop down to 13th or 14th, and people might say Crystal Palace, they're not safe. But ultimately, over a 38-game season, Crystal Palace are going to be a team that just sort of rise to the top of the bottom half of the table. They're top of the bottom, if that makes sense. They're always sort of 11th place. Their next 2 games include Brentford and Wolves. Brentford, definitely not easy. The Wolves game would be massive. They really don't want to give Wolves their first 3 points of the season. That is if Wolves haven't beaten Everton beforehand. But yeah, Crystal Palace, decent sign so far. I think they're going to be alright again. And we'll finish off with Nottingham Forest, who are just about in that top half after 2 games. Funnily enough, kind of similar start to last season as well. They lost their first game of the season on the road, and then they've won their second game of the season, which was their first home game. To be honest, I'm quite impressed with Nottingham Forest, because although I expected them to lose to Arsenal and beat Sheffield United, which is what they've done, against Arsenal to just lose 2-1, like we say, was quite encouraging. They kept themselves in that game. They didn't get battered. They didn't concede 5 this time at the Emirates. Awoniyi got his goal in that one, which got them up and running in terms of goal scoring for the season. And against Sheffield United, I think some Forest fans might not feel totally satisfied with the performance. I think in the first half, Forest were really good. It did feel like a Premier League team playing a Championship team, and it's good for Forest to feel feel that they're now an established Premier League team. Second half, maybe not as good because Sheffield United came back into it. They scored a really good goal through Gustavo Hamer, of course. But the main thing is Nottingham Forest won that game. And as I say, there was encouraging things from it. Morgan Gibbs-White, I'm always going to bang his drum. He's such a good player. And Taiwo Awoniyi, he's always going to get the goals. He got another goal in that game. And Chris Wood as well. I thought they looked really dangerous in the air from crosses and set pieces, of course, as well. Honestly, I think Nottingham Forest can be happy with what they've got so far. They've been dealt a really hard hand at the start of this season. Some really difficult away games. Their next two games are Manchester United and Chelsea away. They've got a cup game against Burnley in between that. And they did go quite far in the Carabao Cup last year. Let's see how they get on. But like we say, the focus is the Premier League here, and I think Forest can be happy that they've not been destroyed by Arsenal. They've got their first 3 points against Sheffield United. They didn't want to give them anything because Sheffield United are a team that are going to try and drag Nottingham Forest in. They have got a home game against Burnley in the league, which they probably need to target as well. But so far, so good for Nottingham Forest. It is also obviously worth mentioning there are teams above 10th place, maybe Aston Villa or West Ham, who could potentially drop into the bottom half at some point in the season. I'm not trying to discredit those teams because West Ham have had a good start to the season and Villa bounced back after the defeat against Newcastle United. But obviously the Premier League relegation battle is always something very fascinating. Very early at this moment in time, but we are looking at the early signs here. Big set of Premier League games coming this weekend. Do join us on the channel for my predictions with Sophie tomorrow. If you've enjoyed this video though, please do make sure to drop a like and do make sure of course to subscribe if you haven't already to get your Premier League fix. I will see you all in the next video, guys. Peace out.